I never imagined I'd be banned from my own sister's wedding. Not because I caused trouble, not because I disrespected anyone, but because, in their eyes, I had become an embarrassment. My name is Daniel Carter. I grew up in a family where love was conditional and respect was measured by success. My parents were practical people, cold in their own way. To them, worth was proven through achievements, titles, and income. And for most of my adult life, I had none of those. My younger sister, Rachel, was the opposite of me. She followed the path my parents admired: top grades, a stable career, and finally, an engagement to a wealthy man from a respected family. To my parents, Rachel's wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was a public display of success, and I didn't fit the picture. 2 weeks before the wedding, my father called me into the living room. My mother sat beside him, arms crossed, eyes distant. "You shouldn't come to the wedding," my father said, without hesitation. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. He didn't laugh back. "Your situation, your lifestyle, it doesn't look good," my mother added. "People will ask questions. Question." That was their fear. I was unemployed at the time, or at least that's what they thought. I wore simple clothes, drove an old car, and lived quietly. I didn't post my life online. I didn't talk about money. I didn't brag. To them, silence meant failure. Rachel didn't say anything. She just looked down. And that hurt more than their words. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just nodded. "All right," I said. "I won't come." The days leading up to the wedding passed quietly. I watched from a distance as preparations filled the family group chats I was slowly being excluded from. Dress fittings, venue photos, guest lists, everything except me. But I still prepared something. A gift. Not wrapped in gold paper. Not something loud, something meaningful. On the morning of the wedding, I didn't show up at the venue. I didn't wait outside. I didn't create drama. Instead, I sent a small sealed box with my name written on it. From Daniel, for Rachel. During the reception, surrounded by guests, Rachel noticed the gift, placed quietly among dozens of others. My parents exchanged uneasy glances when they saw my name. "She shouldn't open that now," my mother whispered. But curiosity won. Rachel opened it. Inside was a letter. Her hands began to shake as she read. The room slowly went silent. Then she screamed, not in fear, in shock. Tears streamed down her face as she read the final line. "What is it?" her husband asked, confused. Rachel stood up, trembling. This says Daniel owns the company funding half this wedding." The room exploded in whispers. My parents froze, because it was true. The venue, the catering company, the event planning firm, they all belonged to a holding group. Mine. Years earlier, when I disappeared from family gatherings and stopped explaining myself, I wasn't failing. I was building. Quietly, patiently. While everyone underestimated me, the letter explained everything. How I had invested, how I had grown, how I chose silence over validation, and why I never corrected their assumptions. At the bottom of the letter was one final sentence. I wasn't absent because I had nothing. I stayed away because I didn't need to prove anything. Rachel collapsed into a chair, crying. My father couldn't speak. My mother avoided everyone's eyes. Minutes later, my phone rang. It was Rachel. "Where are you?" she asked through tears. "I didn't want to ruin the day," I said calmly. "You didn't," she replied. "You changed everything." I didn't go to the wedding. I didn't need applause. I didn't need apologies. My revenge wasn't loud. It was quiet, elegant, undeniable. They didn't want me at the wedding, but my gift made sure I was remembered forever. The wedding ended early, not officially. Of course. Music continued. Guests smiled. Glasses clinked. But something invisible had shattered in that room, and everyone felt it. The joy felt forced now, like a performance that had lost its meaning. Rachel locked herself in the bridal suite. My parents didn't follow her. They couldn't, because for the first time in their lives, they were the ones being judged. Whispers followed them everywhere they went. "Isn't that her brother? He owns the companies? They banned him? My father stood near the bar, staring into a glass he hadn't touched. His shoulders looked smaller than I remembered. My mother sat stiffly at a table, nodding mechanically whenever someone spoke to her. Her smile cracked and fragile. They had spent years building an image, and in one moment, it collapsed. Meanwhile, I was sitting alone in my apartment, phone resting face down on the table. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check social media. I already knew what was happening. Silence was my choice and my power. When my phone finally rang again, it wasn't Rachel. It was my father. He let it ring. Again and again. Finally, I answered. "Daniel," he said, his voice unsteady. "Why didn't you tell us?" I smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. "You never asked," I replied. There was a long pause. "We thought you were struggling," he said quietly. "No," I said. "You assumed I was." Another pause. "Longer this time. You embarrassed us today." My mother's voice suddenly cut in. She had taken the phone. "You could have told us beforehand." That's when I felt it. Not anger, clarity. "I was embarrassed for years," I said calmly. Today wasn't about humiliation. It was about truth. She didn't respond because there was nothing left to say. Rachel came to see me the next morning. She looked different. Not like a bride anymore. Just my little sister again, tired eyes, no makeup, emotions raw and unfiltered. "I didn't know," she whispered, sitting across from me. "I should have defended you." I nodded. "I know." She swallowed hard. "Why didn't you come yourself?" "Because then it would have been about me," I said. The gift spoke better than I ever could. She broke down then. "I let them treat you like nothing," she cried. I reached across the table and held her hand. "You were raised by them too." For the first time in years, we talked honestly. About childhood, about expectations, about silence, about how love in our family was always tied to approval. Rachel told me something that surprised me. "They bragged about you after," she said softly. I raised an eyebrow. "They told people you were private, selective, strategic, like they knew all along." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. That's how people like them survived shame, by rewriting the story. But the truth didn't need defending, because the truth had already won. Over the next few weeks, things changed. Invitations started coming in. Family dinners, business events, apologies disguised as curiosity. I declined most of them, not out of bitterness, out of boundaries. My parents tried to reconnect, slowly, carefully, like people afraid of saying the wrong thing. But something had shifted permanently. The power dynamic was gone. They no longer spoke down to me. They spoke carefully, and that difference mattered. As for me, life continued. My company expanded into new markets. A major acquisition closed quietly. Press requests came in, which I declined. I preferred being unknown. Mystery was useful, but the real victory wasn't financial. It was internal. I no longer felt the need to explain myself. No need to prove. No need to be seen. No need to be invited. They had excluded me once, and in doing so, they gave me the perfect stage without ever knowing it. One evening, I received a message from Rachel. "Do you regret it?" she asked. I looked out the window at the city lights, the same kind I used to stare at years ago, wondering if I'd ever matter. "No," I typed back. I needed it to happen exactly that way, because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's revelation. And sometimes being banned from the room is exactly what puts you above it. The weeks after the wedding felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just different. It was as if the world had subtly adjusted its posture around me. People spoke to me with more care now. Conversations slowed when I entered a room. Invitations arrived with polite language and carefully chosen words. The same people who once ignored me now hesitated before speaking, as if unsure where I stood. Power has a sound, and silence is one of them. My parents didn't call every day, but when they did, their tone had changed. No commands, no lectures, just cautious words and uncomfortable pauses. They asked questions now, about my work, about my plans, about my life. They had never asked before. I answered politely, briefly. I gave them nothing they hadn't earned. Rachel visited often, not because she felt obligated, but because she wanted to understand. She asked about the early years, about the loneliness, about how I survived being invisible for so long. I told her some of it, not all. Some stories are meant to stay buried. One afternoon, she asked the question she had been avoiding. "Do you hate them?" she said softly. I thought about it. "No," I replied. "I outgrew them." She nodded, slowly. That hurt her more than hatred ever could. Meanwhile, my professional world expanded in ways I had anticipated, but still found surreal. A venture capital firm reached out, not to invest, but to partner. A logistics contract I had been quietly building toward for years finally materialized. The numbers on paper were impressive, but the real value was influence. Influence meant choice. Choice meant freedom. I no longer chased opportunities. I selected them. At a private industry event, someone mentioned my family. "Must have been proud, seeing your parents at the wedding," a man said casually. I smiled. "They saw me," I replied. "For the first time." He laughed, not realizing the weight of that sentence. That night, my mother called. "I heard people talking about you today," she said carefully. "They admire you." I said nothing. "I wish we had supported you more," she added, almost whispering. That was new, but it was also late. Support, when it arrives after success, is rarely love. It's relief. "I'm glad you're proud now," I replied calmly. "I learned to be proud of myself a long time ago." She didn't respond. The shift wasn't dramatic. There were no confrontations, no shouting, no apologies that felt cinematic or satisfying. Just distance and understanding and regret, which is often worse. My father tried once, really tried. He invited me to lunch. We sat across from each other in silence for several minutes before he spoke. "I thought success would make you stronger," he said. "I didn't know it would make you unreachable." I met his eyes. "It didn't make me unreachable," I said. "It made me unafraid." That ended the conversation. After that, they stopped pushing, and I respected them more for it. Revenge, I realized, doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like growth so complete that the people who hurt you no longer recognize you or themselves in your presence. I hadn't won because they were ashamed. I had won because I was free. Free from needing approval. Free from being explained. Free from the past. Late one evening, I walked past the venue where the wedding had taken place. The lights were off. The building quiet. Just another space now, emptied of meaning. I paused for a moment, then I kept walking, because my story didn't peak there. It began there, and the people who once banned me from the room were now just spectators to a life I no longer needed to justify. Success doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes, it arrives quietly and changes everything without asking permission. By the time a year had passed since the wedding, my life had settled into a rhythm I had once only imagined. My companies expanded across states. New partnerships formed without me chasing them. Decisions came to my desk instead of me begging for meetings. And yet, the strangest changes weren't happening in boardrooms. They were happening at home. My parents had become careful. Careful with words, careful with expectations, careful with me. They no longer spoke about family reputation the way they used to. No more lectures about appearances, no more subtle comparisons. It was as if the rules they once enforced had turned against them. One evening, my father asked to see me again. This time, it wasn't lunch in public. It was dinner at home. The same house where I had grown up feeling like a disappointment. Walking through the door felt surreal. The walls looked smaller, the furniture older. The power that once lived in that house was gone, replaced by something fragile. We sat at the dining table. My mother served food silently. Rachel watched carefully, like someone afraid of sudden movement. No one spoke for a while. Then my father cleared his throat. "I spent my whole life believing discipline creates success," he said. "I thought pressure made people stronger." I listened. "I didn't realize," he continued, that pressure without love only teaches people how to leave. My mother's eyes filled with tears. That was it. That was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get. And strangely, it was enough. Not because it erased the past, but because it confirmed something important. I was right to walk my own path. I don't hate you, I said calmly. But I don't live for your approval anymore. My father nodded slowly. I see that, he replied. And that's what scares me. I smiled, not cruelly, not proudly, just honestly. After dinner, I stood in my childhood room. The walls were still the same. The ceiling fan still made that soft clicking noise. I remembered lying awake here, feeling small, unheard, unimportant. Now, I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no longing, only closure. Because the room no longer defined me. Outside, Rachel walked me to my car. You changed them, she said softly. No, I replied. They changed because they had to. That night, driving through the city, I realized something powerful. The revenge I thought I wanted, a confrontation, an apology, a dramatic moment, was never what I needed. What I needed was independence. And I had already won. I had built a life so full, so grounded, so strong that the people who once controlled me no longer had access to my emotions. That's when you know you've healed. Not when they regret, but when you don't need them to. Time has a way of revealing the truth that emotions try to hide. 2 years after the wedding, my life looked nothing like it used to. Not because I chased luxury, but because I built stability. My companies had grown into something larger than I ever planned. Offices in different cities, teams that trusted me, decisions that affected thousands of lives. And yet, the greatest transformation wasn't visible on paper. It was internal. I no longer felt small when I entered rooms. I no longer measured my worth through other people's eyes. And most importantly, I no longer carried the weight of being unwanted. My parents watched all of this from a distance. They didn't interfere. They didn't advise. They didn't correct. They observed. Sometimes, I'd catch my mother staring at me during family gatherings quietly, almost regretfully, not with pride, with realization. The realization that the son they once underestimated had built a life so strong it no longer needed validation. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call. My father had been hospitalized. Nothing life-threatening, they said, but serious enough. I went, not because I felt obligated, because I chose to. He looked smaller in the hospital bed, older, vulnerable. The authority that once filled rooms was gone, replaced by something human. He looked at me and said something I never thought I'd hear. I was wrong. Just 3 words, but they carried a lifetime of weight. I thought success made men, he continued quietly. But you became one without my approval. I nodded. I learned to, I replied. He looked at me then, not as a disappointment, not as an embarrassment, but as an equal. And for the first time, I felt no need to respond emotionally, because I had already moved on. Rachel stood by the window, listening silently. Later, as we walked out of the hospital together, she asked me a question that surprised me. If they hadn't banned you from the wedding, do you think you'd still be here? I stopped. I thought about it carefully. No, I said honestly. That moment broke something in me, but it also built something stronger. She smiled sadly. Then maybe that pain had a purpose. Maybe it did. Months later, I stood on a stage at a private event, not as a guest, but as a speaker. Young entrepreneurs sat in front of me, listening intently. Many of them came from broken families, from silence, from being underestimated. I told them my story, not the wedding details, not the humiliation, but the lesson. Sometimes, I said, people don't reject you because you're weak. They reject you because they don't understand you. And that confusion turns into fear. I paused. The greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's building a life so complete that their opinions lose relevance. The room was silent. That night, I returned home to a message from my mother. I see you now, it read. I wish I had seen you sooner. I didn't reply, not out of bitterness, out of peace, because closure doesn't always require conversation. Sometimes, it's acceptance. Years later, When people ask me about my family, I don't speak with anger. I don't speak with blame. I speak with clarity. They did what they knew. I did what I had to. And in the end, I became someone who no longer needed to be invited into rooms to matter. They banned me from the wedding, but in doing so, they unknowingly gave me the freedom to build something far greater than approval. They gave me distance, and distance gave me vision. My gift didn't shock them because of money. It shocked them because it revealed the truth. I was never behind. I was just building quietly. And when the moment came, I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I simply let my life speak.